Hey there, Lumix S5 Mark II, that's right. I picked one up. I was originally not going to order this camera, but I put in a pre-order about a week ago, and I feel like I was pretty lucky. It showed up yesterday. I didn't expect to get it because I put the pre-order in so late, but I'm pretty pumped about it. Now, like usual, I like to take it out right away and do my first impressions video, but it was raining yesterday. It's been raining for days, and it's very wet out here, as you can probably see. I was hoping to get a nice sunny day today, but definitely not. But I think it's better to just get the camera out and shoot with it and share my experiences, share some images, all that kind of stuff. So disclaimer right up front here, Panasonic did not send me this camera. I bought this with my own money, so the opinion about it in this video and all videos moving forwards are definitely my own. Now, I've never owned a Panasonic camera. I've never used a Panasonic camera before yesterday, so I'm really intrigued by the system and the future of the system, and I'll talk a little bit later about why I decided to pick one up in this video. But first of all, the intro and what I'm filming in right now is in the 6K 10-bit 420 3x2 open gate, so the aspect ratio is very different, great for cropping and all that stuff, something that companies like Fuji also include in their cameras. I think it's a really cool feature. It's a lot of fun to play with, but I'm usually shooting at 16:9. So what I want to do is head around to some other spots around here just to get some different shots and talk to you a little bit about why I picked up this camera, and we'll talk more about my first impressions using Lumix of Panasonic and also this camera in particular. So there are a lot of things that have intrigued me about the Panasonic system, one of which is I've heard there is incredible stabilization in their bodies. And so right now is a quick test of that as I walk down to the lake, and this is at 24 millimeters. I'm hand holding the camera by the lens, and this is with the in-body stabilization, so no electronic stab, and there is no stabilization in this lens, and it is pretty incredible what they can do, especially with a full frame camera. So I'm really excited to have that in this body. And most of you know I'm not much of a handheld vlogger, but I figured I'd test it out for you and show you what it can do in case you're curious about that. There are definitely some cool birds out here today, and just as I walked up to the beach here, 2 great blue herons flew off, some of my favorite birds that live around here. But I don't have a long lens with me today. I would love to try out some longer lenses on the S5 II, specifically the Sigma 100-400 and the 150-600. So if any of you have used that on E-mount or L-mount, let me know down below. I'm really curious about the experience with that and autofocus and stabilization and all that sort of stuff. Anyways, let me talk about why I picked up the S5 II. Now, as I was saying before, I've always been intrigued by Lumix, but in the last few years, most of the content that I make, I'm filming myself, and I really just need reliable autofocus. So that's why I've been sort of going back and forth between Canon and Sony, and why I still own Canon and Sony. But after seeing a lot of the footage come out about the S5 II, people testing it and using it, and also talking to some friends that have used the camera, it seems pretty reliable, and that makes me really excited, and it makes the Lumix system a possibility for me as a content creator and something I want to invest in. And also the fact that Lumix is really video focused, the fact that the S5 II has waveform and shutter angle, which frankly even the FX3, which is labeled as a cinema camera, does not have. And as most of you know, I don't do much photography. I'm a videographer, and so having those kinds of tools in a camera just means so much to me. I absolutely love having that stuff. It makes my life so much easier and enjoyable to use the camera. So in terms of lenses, I had some trouble picking out a lens for this camera, or 1 or 2 lenses just to get started. There is kind of you can kind of get whatever you want, but there's not a ton of options. There's a bunch from Sigma and also some from Lumix. And when I can't decide, I usually just go for a 24-70 f2.8, which is kind of what I have on every system, and it kind of works for everything. So that's what I wound up getting. I wound up getting the Lumix Pro version, and it was a little bit pricey. It's actually very large, but I bought a used copy in great shape, so I'm pretty happy with it so far. It looks like the image quality is awesome. and I'd love to try out some more lenses, as I said, but right now I'm juggling between 3 systems, between Canon, Sony, and Lumix, and I had to sell a whole bunch of gear to be able to afford this, so it is what it is. I would love to try out some more stuff, but that's what I have for now. So in terms of future videos about the S5 II, I don't know how much deep dive testing I'm going to do like I usually do. I usually like to do a lot of comparisons and those sorts of technical tests. I'll do what I have time for. I would really like to see how this camera stacks up against, I think its main competitors being the Canon R6 Mark II and the Sony a7 IV, and I do have both of those cameras right now, so that would be really cool. Anyways, I really want to get on shoot today. It is pretty chilly, and I was hoping the sun would peek out, but I think it's about to rain. So I'm gonna head back to the studio, take a look at the footage, and talk to you a little bit more about my experience just coming out and shooting with the S5 II. All right, so I'm back home, and I warmed up and finished editing all the footage that you just saw. And overall, I have to say I'm really impressed with the image coming out of the S5 Mark II. Now, I know that Vlog is an incredible log profile, but I've never gotten a chance to use it before. And it's really interesting for me because I shoot on a lot of different camera systems, and I'm just fascinated when I get to shoot with a different system and work with a different log profile. And when I brought the images into the computer, I have to say they were super easy to grade. I could tell this camera's got a lot of dynamic range. Of course, it wasn't a super sunny day, so a lot of the shots didn't have a ton of dynamic range, but I could see there was a lot of latitude in there, and the image looked very clean. Grading it, I didn't use any LUTs, I just graded it by hand and just did a basic correction. But what I did notice was that when I pushed saturation into the image, it definitely held onto it really well and just looked like a really robust codec. So really happy with that. In terms of the detail and sharpness, I was also really happy with that, and it looked great, had some great detail and sharpness without looking too digital. It looked very natural and organic, and overall I'd say the image looked very pleasant and very just nice and easy. And I don't know if that's this lens, which is I think is pretty awesome, and or the body, or probably both. And I'll probably have to do more of a review on the lens at some point once I experiment with a couple different lenses, but overall this combination just looks awesome. As I said, the intro in the video was shot in the 6K open gate, so that's a 6K resolution in 10-bit 420. Now, I didn't do a heavy color grade, so I didn't really notice much of a difference in the grading between that, and usually what I shoot in is a 10-bit 422 codec. So if you're doing some heavy color grading, you might see a difference, but I didn't really see any difference there. And then after the intro, that was shot in the 4K 16:9 mode, and that is a 6K oversample to 4K and a 10-bit 422 codec. That's probably what I'm gonna shoot in most of the time, and I'm delivering this in a 4K timeline, so I didn't see much of a difference in terms of the resolution and detail and colors and stuff between those two. Now, there are a lot of different codecs and frame rate options in this camera. It's a little overwhelming, but I think those are probably the two that I'm gonna be using most of the time, so that's what I decided to show in this video. Now I want to talk for a few minutes here about the ergonomics, the build quality, and my experience using the camera and my first impressions. So anytime you use a new camera, it always feels weird. You don't know where things are in the menu system, you don't know where the buttons are, the dials, and all that kind of stuff. I think within a few hours I got used to the menu system. I don't really have it memorized or know where anything is still, but I was able to go through and customize and get the camera up and running. And there's definitely some quirky stuff in there, like every camera, that I, had to work out, but I think maybe after I use this camera for a while, I will make a setup video as someone who is coming to the system for the first time. Either way, just the overall balance, I just want to talk about the lens for a second, is this lens is massive and it doesn't really feel balanced with this body, and that's kind of a comment about the lens, probably more than the body because it's so big, but either way, it's hard to hold. It puts strain on your wrist if you are holding it, but I had this on a tripod most of the time when I was out shooting today. So I guess you get what you expect with their Pro Series lenses. It is a pretty big and heavy lens, but kind of similar to the Canon RF 24-70 f2.8. This is only slightly bigger and slightly heavier. All right, so in terms of the build quality and overall feel of the camera, it's nice. It's a very solid feeling camera, a lot of metal construction. It kind of reminds me of the XH2S in some ways. The buttons and dials are just really well made. They're very satisfying and metal and clicky, which is really nice. You have all the custom modes here, which is awesome. It's also, as I said, very video focused. You have white balance and ISO buttons, which I absolutely love. You have the power switch on and off right here on the right-hand side, which I'm a huge fan of, which I love on the R6 Mark II as well. Now, in terms of the exposure controls, you do have 3 of them, but I couldn't figure out how to change them for what I'm used to, and I think you're kind of limited in that way. So this right here is for your aperture. Usually I have the aperture up here, but it's just something I'm gonna have to get used to. This is set up for shutter angle or shutter speed. Of course, I have it set for shutter angle. And then on the back here, we have the wheel here, which will change the ISO, and it's also like a touchpad here, so it's like a multi-control. And then that works really well. And then this here is really interesting. This is for changing your manual focus to autofocus. You can just flip this dial here. And then also it's got a button in the middle. So when you hit this, it brings up all of your autofocus modes. So it's just kind of a clever design, and you can easily just change everything. If you need to change your autofocus, just hit that button. So yeah, overall I was really happy with everything in terms of the layout and stuff, and just taking some getting used to. I didn't get a chance to really use the EVF besides just testing it quickly before I went out. I was using the LCD, but it was plenty bright out for me today. You can just crank up the backlight and on the EVF, or sorry, on the LCD, and it worked pretty well. One complaint I do have is the flaps on the side here. So they're kind of like, I just don't like them. They feel cheap, and I feel like I'm gonna break them. Also, like, to get it to go back in, there are these like little tabs right here that you have to like push them in. I just don't really like the design, but guess what's in here? Full-size HDMI, so I'm very happy about that. Has dual card slots, which is great. They're both SD cards. You can dual record, relay record, all that kind of stuff. Battery life seemed great. I didn't like do a runtime test, but I went out and shot that whole vlog with just one battery. So yeah, overall, pretty happy with their ergonomics and design of the camera. Of course, it also has a fan in it that it's under here. It's kind of a clever design. It's really cool that you don't even really notice it's there. And there's a vent. I don't know which way the fan goes, but there's a vent here and there's a vent underneath here. And that way it won't overheat. So yeah, overall build quality was great. As I said, it's gonna take a little while to get used to the menu system. There's definitely some quirks. One complaint I have right away about the menu system is that when you go into the record quality here, there are just so many options here. It is just like overwhelming to try to pick out which ones you want. I wish it was a little more structured like it is in some of the other cameras, but what I did was in the Q menu, you can set up to have all of your favorite ones in there. So I have all the ones I use here, so that way I don't have to go through the menu each time. And I think after I use this camera for a bit, I'll probably make a video about how I set it up and use it, because I'm not coming from this camera from the perspective of a seasoned Lumix user. So overall, yeah, I was really happy with it. I think it takes some getting used to, but it does feel really nice to use. All right, so as you can probably tell, I'm really impressed with this camera so far, both in terms of how it operates and functions, but also the image quality that it produces. So this was literally the first day I shot with this camera, so this is in no way, shape, or form a review. I will test this camera out as much as I have time for and compare it with other cameras and all the stuff that I usually do. Now, I'm often picking up cameras to test and review for all of you out there, providing independent and honest reviews, so that if you're looking to purchase one of these cameras or compare it with a camera you have or thinking about, that's kind of why I get a lot of these cameras, and it's also really fun for me to play with them. But the S5 II is a little bit different for me because I really do want to incorporate Lumix into my workflow, and now that it has a reliable autofocus system on top of an already impressive camera system, I'm really pumped to work with Lumix in terms of my workflow, and I'm gonna try to see how I can fit it in. So I will be putting out as much content as I can, but I have to say that I'm really trying to make this work, as I said, as part of my camera system in the way that I create content and shoot video and all that kind of stuff. All right, so if you've been watching this far into the video, I have a quick plug for you because you're probably gonna be interested in this. I'm starting a new podcast all about filmmaking and camera gear with my good friend, Brandon Talbot. It's gonna be on a separate YouTube channel, which I will leave down below. Also, we'll be taking questions from all of you, so there's instructions for how to do that down in the description. So head over there, subscribe to that channel, and we'll see you over there. Also, thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you in the next one.